China still says it wants to unite with Taiwan peacefully, but it has never said it wouldn't use force if necessary. In fact, for the past 20 years, China has been modernizing its military with the goal of building up the tools it needs to take over Taiwan. These tools include ballistic missiles, advanced fighter jets, and the biggest navy in the world. The People's Liberation Army, China's military, has been practicing fighting skills around Taiwan for many years by holding bigger and more complex military games. As the chance of peacefully taking over Taiwan grows, Taiwanese identity grows, and interest in merging with the People's Republic of China, PRC, decreases. This could lead China to believe that force is the only way to reach its political goals. Would you believe us if we told you that China might not attack Taiwan ever? That sounds strange, right? There are a lot of scary threats about Taiwan's uncertain future, but they don't always match up with how decisions are made in real life. It's possible that China won't invade in full because of important reasons. Want to know what these reasons are? Let's find out in today's video. Before getting into the details though, let's take a step back and look at the relationship between Taiwan and China as a whole, with all of its many complicated parts. By looking at the past and present economies, we can see why a Chinese attack may not be as close as some people think. Taipei has a very long and interesting past. Taiwanese people who lived there before Europeans came to live there about 6,000 years ago. But things were different when China took over the island during the Qing era in the 1600s. Before 1895, China ruled Taiwan. But that year, China lost a big war with Japan and had to give Taiwan to the Japanese Empire. Taiwan might still be ruled by Japan if World War II hadn't happened. Once the war was over in 1945, though, the island was given back to China. It looked like that. Soon after, in 1949, the Chinese Civil War was over. General Chiang Kai-shek's nationalist government was beaten by the Chinese Communist Party, which was led by Mao Zedong. The nationalists ran away to Taiwan to avoid being persecuted, and let's be honest, even being killed. After they were safe, they kept saying that they were the real government of all of China, even the mainland. Mainland China, on the other hand, saw Taiwan as part of its land that needed to be reunified with the mainland, no matter what it took. Does this sound like something you've heard before? That first time around, the whole world was on Taiwan's Republic of China, or ROC, side. China was seen as an outcast around the world because of Mao Zedong's harsh rule, which helped the cause. That help didn't last, though. The United Nations, UN, cut ties with Taiwan in 1971, taking away its place on the UN Security Council and giving it to Mao's PRC as the only representative of China. It wasn't a surprise that other countries did the same thing and switched their formal recognition from the ROC to the PRC. These days, only a dozen countries still publicly recognize Taiwan as a separate country. Even though Taiwan was cut off from the rest of the world, it didn't give up. It was determined to stand on its own. And it did so, becoming a wealthy and democratic society in the process. It is now a new high for about 67% of people in Taiwan to say they are Taiwanese. Another 28% think of themselves as both Chinese and Taiwanese, and only about 3% think of themselves as mostly Chinese. But it was never really about how the people of Taiwan see themselves. It was about what mainland China said. After its economic boom in the 1980s, even mainland China agreed to a time of peace. But in 2016, Taiwan chose Tsai Ing-wen as its first female president, which changed things. Tsai and her Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, didn't agree with the One China concept like her predecessors did. Tensions between Taiwan and mainland China rose because of this change. Beijing saw Tsai's presidency as a threat to its claims of control over Taiwan. Since 2016, relations between China and Taiwan have been very tense, and there doesn't seem to be any way to make things better soon. It seems like every new event turns up the heat, making the strife even worse. When US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi went to Taiwan in August 2022, it was one of the tense times. The PRC may have lost it after this meeting, if they were even able to keep their cool. In response, they put on a huge military show, which included live fire drills for almost a week. The People's Liberation Army, PLA, fired at least 11 ballistic missiles at Taiwan during these drills. They also sent more than 200 military planes and more than 50 boats to scare the island. On top of that, a lot of these planes flew over the middle line in the Taiwan Strait, which acts as a kind of sea border between China and Taiwan. The area around Taiwan felt like it was at war. In 2023, when Kevin McCarthy, who took over for Pelosi, received Taiwan's president in California, there was a similar, though less dramatic, reaction. In this case, the PRC put 14 airplanes and 3 warships close to Taiwan to act like they were attacking and blocking the island. But if China really wants Taiwan so badly, why not just invade mainland? There are many economic, military, and practical reasons why China doesn't want to start a full-scale armed conflict with Taiwan. Also, these things make us think that China might not attack Taiwan at all. The business reasons are the first to be broken down. Most of the time, attacks are caused by economic reasons. As a way to get to new markets, resources, trade routes, and workers, countries attack. And let's be honest, China could benefit a lot from this kind of access, especially since it's still trying to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and its GDP growth rate fell below 5% in 2024. That being said, China might lose more than it gains by attacking Taiwan in this case. This is why, when it comes to electronics, Taiwan is a big deal in the tech world. It makes more than 60% of the world's semiconductors. For the most advanced chips used in cutting-edge technologies like AI, 5G, and electric cars, that number jumps to over 90%. Taiwan is the only country that makes more electronics than China, but not as many or as well. Indeed, China is one of Taiwan's main markets for these high-tech chips. After crude oil, semiconductors are the most important thing that China imports. China bought about $350 billion worth of chips in 2023, which is a little more than the $340 billion it spent on oil. China's economy would suffer a lot if Taiwan stopped sending semiconductors to other countries. That's exactly what would happen if there was an attack. Some experts even think that Taiwan might destroy its own factories that make semiconductors if it were attacked, just to keep them from falling into Chinese hands. It would be terrible for everyone if that happened. According to a study by the US Department of Defense, taking Taiwan out of the semiconductor business could take out $2.5 trillion from the world's GDP in just 1 year. This would cause one of the worst economic downturns in recent memory. Also, microchips are used in China's most powerful weapons. Without a steady supply of Taiwanese semiconductors, the PLA would have a hard time running its high-tech drones and weapons. This may make you wonder if China could just make more semiconductors to make up for Taiwan's lack. There is a chance that China could make more semiconductors. It has come a long way in this area, becoming almost 11% less dependent on Taiwan from 2022 to 2023. But increasing that output would take a huge amount of work, years of dedication, and billions of dollars. It's also not possible for China to waste those resources. China might be able to replace Taiwan's semiconductor production or take its reserves, but that doesn't mean an attack has to happen. We've only looked at business reasons why an invasion might not happen so far. This is the next part, the military reasons. To give you some idea, the Global Firepower Index says that China is the third strongest military power in the world, and that Taiwan is ranked 24th. This may make you wonder how military concerns could stop China from attacking Taiwan. The answer is that the US, which is the world's most powerful armed power, is a big reason. The United States' role in East Asia makes it much less likely that China will invade Taiwan. The US has written laws like the Taiwan Relations Act and the Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act that back up its promise to support Taiwan. The US has to help Taiwan defend itself if it is invaded because of these rules. The bad news for China is that the US isn't waiting for an attack before arming Taiwan. The United States gave Taiwan its first ever military help package worth up to $345 million in 2023, right after China's big military moves in the South China Sea. And that's just the start. The Taiwan Enhanced Resilience Act says that from 2023 to 2027, the US can give Taiwan up to $2 billion a year in defense aid. That's a major buildup of the military. This is a direct answer to China's record-high military buildup in the area, which could make it easier to invade Taiwan in full. It's not just military gear that the US is sending to Taiwan, though. The US isn't just a faraway ally. It has troops stationed around Taiwan, ready to act if necessary. Japan and South Korea are two of the top 3 countries where the United States has the most troops stationed abroad. Both are close to Taiwan. With more than 53,000 US troops, Japan is at the top of the list. South Korea comes in third with more than 24,000 troops. The US Navy is also present in Guam and Singapore, which are also important places. This means that the US could quickly strengthen Taiwan if it were to be invaded. That's not all the help, though. If China invades, other countries might also step up to stop it. Not all of these countries are against China because they are US friends. Many of them have their own reasons. Think about Japan as an example. Japan's relationship with China is tense because of old grudges and disagreements over land. People often say that China is Japan's greatest strategic challenge. Japan is moving away from its long-held peace and building up its military in response to China's growing military power in the Pacific. Japan said in 2023 that it would spend $320 billion on its defense over the next 5 years. This is a big change for a country that is known for being peaceful, and it will put Japan at the top of the list of countries that spend the most on their defense. China claims parts of the first island chain, which Japan is an important part of. In other words, Japan is not just a spectator, it is an important part of the region's defense plan. So, why does the first island chain matter if China and Taiwan get into a fight? The chain that goes from Japan to the Philippines could make it harder for China's navy to get to the Pacific Ocean, and by extension, Taiwan. This is because the chain works as a natural barrier. For the most part, these countries want to keep Taiwan from being invaded, so they'll likely use their key locations to their advantage. The Philippines, for instance, has had its share of disagreements with China, mostly over rights to land in the South China Sea. The Philippines has strengthened its defense ties with the US as a result, letting American troops store military supplies at 9 bases in the country. Many of these sites are in the northern part of the Philippines. They make the first island chain longer and reach further out into the South China Sea. China is being watched by more than just the first island chain. With its new attack submarines that are driven by nuclear power, Australia is also helping to keep other countries from attacking. Australia is buying these submarines to strengthen its navy as part of the AUKUS defense partnership with the US and the UK. Part of the reason for the move is to stop China from attacking Taiwan, even though the stated reason is to improve Australia's defenses. And these subs really do act as a big deterrent. Australia is going to buy 3 to 5 Virginia-class attack submarines. These are the newest and best underwater weapon systems in the US Navy. These submarines are made to find and kill both enemy surface ships and submarines. They are very effective at keeping people away for 2 main reasons. First, it's very hard to find and kill them. Second, they can have nuclear bombs attached to them. There's more though. Australia isn't just going to buy Virginia-class submarines. The country is also making a new class of ships called the SSN AUKUS. These ships will improve the country's defenses and send a strong message that it is committed to peace and stability in the area. However, Australia hasn't said for sure that it will help the US defend Taiwan if China invades. Also, there's no guarantee that any of the countries named would send troops or military gear to help Taiwan. Does this mean that China might find it easy to sneak in? Not really. Invading Taiwan would still be very hard, even if it were acting on its own, because of many military and logistical problems. China hasn't been in a major war in many years. The last big war China was in was the Sino-Vietnamese War in 1979. It continued for about a month before China packed up and went home. China hasn't really put its forces to the test in a big war in a long time. On the other hand, Taiwan has been getting ready for a possible fight almost from the beginning. What makes this interesting is that Taiwan's strength is a big reason why an attack would be hard. Taiwan isn't very big, but its military is top-notch and well-trained, and thanks to the US, it works well too. The military in Taiwan is fighting to protect its own land, and they are not going to stop. Taiwan bought defense gear from the US for a huge $1.8 billion just in 2023. This is a quick list of what that money bought. 16 high-tech air warfare missiles worth $619 million, F-16 infrared search and track systems worth $580 million, ammunition and technical support worth $332 million, and spare and repair parts for weapons and vehicles worth $180 million. In other words, Taiwan is serious about its defense and won't let anyone off the hook, and Taiwan's budget for the military is only going to keep going up. So let's say China doesn't care about any of this and invades anyway. In the end, China's army is much bigger and stronger than Taiwan's. That must mean that they will win, right? Not so quickly. Taiwan also has a big secret weapon: its location. The weather seems to be on Taiwan's side too. So, why would an attack of Taiwan be so hard to plan? To begin, it would have to be an attack by both land and sea, since Taiwan is an island. It is much harder to launch an amphibious attack than a normal land invasion because you need special gear and great teamwork. If one thing goes wrong, the whole process can fail. There are also a lot of islands for China to deal with, more than 100 of them, and most of them are full of artillery weapons and strong military defenses. The islands are the only ones there. For China to get to them, it would have to cross the Taiwan Strait. which is a 100-mile stretch of rough water between China and Taiwan. On top of that, the Chinese military can only do this at certain times of the year because they have to deal with 2 rainy seasons, high tides, typhoons, and other severe weather. It's not just a matter of power, it's also a problem for getting things done. Anyway, China can't just wait for nice weather and then act quickly. It would first have to move hundreds of thousands of forces across the Taiwan Strait. Taiwan has a little more than 200,000 soldiers on active duty, but China would need at least 4 or 5 times that many to easily win. As big as the famous D-Day attack was during World War II, this operation would likely have to be even bigger. Do you remember D-Day? Over the 100-mile English Channel, about 7,000 ships and almost 200,000 soldiers took part. It took more than 3 weeks for the 850,000 troops to free France when they landed on the beaches of Normandy. Imagine that China wants to cross the Taiwan Strait with about 1 million forces. They don't have nearly enough ships to do that. It wouldn't help much if they tried to use private or business ships. These ships are less safe and take a long time to empty. All of this noise would give Taiwan a lot of time to set up defenses, fire at the ships that were coming in, and send a lot of troops to possible landing sites to protect them. What about landing sites? China would also have a hard time there. China doesn't have many deep water ports or beaches that are big enough to handle a large landing. Most of the other places have very shallow water, so China's ships would have to stop far from the shore and move troops and supplies slowly. Taiwan would be ready with troops, artillery, and rockets, no matter which choice China makes. But let's say China is able to get past all of these problems. They still have to deal with another big problem, though: Taiwan's rough environment. Along the coast of eastern Taiwan, there are many mountains, some of which are over 12,000 feet high. If China wants to take over these tough places, they'll have to fight guerrilla war against Taiwanese troops who know the area very well. Even if the Chinese forces get through the mountains, they'll quickly be stuck in a battle for Taipei, the capital of the island. And it's not easy to take Taipei. There are only a few important routes into the city, and the Taiwanese forces would probably destroy them to slow down the Chinese advance. If the Chinese troops get through, they will have to fight in brutal, slow-moving battles on each street. This will make the attack last a long time and be very bloody. This situation sounds a lot like what Russia is doing in Ukraine right now. A big power invades a much smaller neighbor, thinking it will be easy to win. Instead, it faces strong resistance and gets stuck in a long war with major economic and diplomatic effects. We should be honest. Taiwan has even better geographical benefits than Ukraine. Even though both Ukraine and Taiwan have home courts, Taiwan has a big advantage thanks to its rough mountains and crowded towns that are ready to fight back. Also, Taiwan has been getting ready for a Chinese attack for a long time, and the US is ready to help with heavy weapons. It has also gotten help from the United Kingdom, Germany, Japan, Australia, and the Philippines over the years. Ukraine got a lot of military help, but no country has truly promised to save it like these allies have for Taiwan. This means that what's happening in Ukraine is a very big red flag for China. Since they've seen how tough the US can be as a friend, they know how tough it would be as an enemy. If China really wants to invade Taiwan, it might end up being a long, expensive, and ultimately unsuccessful fight. It would be very expensive for China to win, even if they did. That's likely why Xi Jinping, the leader of China, has been trying to make peace around the world. He went so far as to offer a 12-point peace plan for Ukraine in April 2023. He also invited French President Emmanuel Macron and Ursula von der Leyen, the head of the European Commission, to Beijing to talk about the war. There's no doubt that China is second-guessing its decision to start a war with Taiwan. A few days later, Ma Ying-jeou, Taiwan's past president, made news when he went to mainland China. When he did this, he became the first Taiwanese leader since 1949 to do it. It was a pretty big deal. He talked about how Taiwan and China have a lot in common, like blood, language, history, and culture. Since China has already won in talks, it would be very stupid for Xi Jinping to start an expensive war. Still, we know from past that strange things do happen. So, a full-scale Chinese attack of Taiwan is not impossible, but it doesn't look likely right now. Here are some things that might make China act. 1. Perceived weakness of the US. How the US handles conflicts like the one in Ukraine, or the one between Israel and the Palestinians, could change how strong or weak it looks to the rest of the world. The US might seem less able to help in other situations if these wars start to make the military too busy to fight them. 2. The relationship between the US and Taiwan. How the US and Taiwan talk to each other could be very important. China might think something is wrong if high-level US officials keep going to Taiwan, or if Taiwan keeps getting a lot of weapons from the US. China might be more likely to act if the US changed its strategy and officially backed Taiwanese independence. 3. The health of President Xi. One thing that could go wrong is that some people think Xi Jinping may not be in the best of health. Should that be true, he might want to do something big, like bringing China back together to leave a lasting impression before it's too late. What do you think? Given all the problems China would face, are any of these reasons strong enough to make China invade Taiwan?